The next step was for the CFO and myself to meet with members of the Financial Advisory Committee to discuss the budget process. The Financial Advisory Committee developed new sheets to show the total expenditures by department, including such things as benefits costs, vehicle, gasoline usage, as well as revenues realized from each department. Steve and I also met with the mayor, the deputy mayor, and members of the Financial Advisory Committee a couple of times to discuss the budget itself, with recommendations for where reductions in expenses or increases in revenues might be able to be achieved. Steve and I then went back and met with some of the larger departments and in an attempt to get additional reductions in their budgets, which we were able to do. The goal is a 0% municipal tax increase, which has not yet been achieved for the 2014 budget. Beginning tonight, the department directors will be discussing their budgets with the village council, and we also have members of the Financial Advisory Committee in attendance this evening. In discussing the department budgets, the village council will be able to gather information about the department's requests, learn about new programs or revenues, and ask questions, which will allow for some final decisions to be made about the individual department budgets. We have 3 departments this evening. It's the Division of Community Services, it's the Building Department with zoning, the Health Department, which includes animal control, and then the tax assessor. So that's what we'll do this evening. And then just so everyone knows, we are meeting again on Friday evening, also at 5 o'clock.
Great, thanks. So why don't we begin with the Building Department? Welcome, guys.
Welcome. Mike Barker. I'm head of the Department of Community Services with Tony Merlino, who is a construction code official, zoning officer, and zoning board secretary. The first budget that we'll be looking at will actually be the construction code, Uniform Construction Code and Enforcement Department. What's not shown in the sheets is this is a volume of the number of permits as well as the revenues over a period of time. It shows the activity from year to year. 2013 was a banner year, both in volume as well as in the revenue that the department took in. If you look at the chart itself, you can see back in 2009 we were down around $638,000, and the volume of permits was around 1,572. So since then, it's taken off. Now, one of the things that we did back then was we went in and looked at our fees and restructured our fees over a 2-year period where we adjusted them. It had been a while since we had adjusted them. And you can see how it has affected the revenues through the last 4 years. Even though the economy's been off, and you will read about new home starts being off, the renovation world seems to be booming. So we seem to be doing a lot of renovation work, alterations. One of the big things now because of the storms is generators. And so when we look at this, it's broken down into the various subcodes, but we just kind of wanted to show that the volume of permits is up and the volume of revenues is up. And from what Tony had just whispered in my ear earlier is that the first 2 months of 2014 seem to continue that trend. So that kind of covers the revenue portion of the construction code department itself. Now with the budget, we are asking for an additional building inspector, a part-time inspector to help with the volume. We have been unable to meet the required time frames for inspections. We're running behind on that, and we feel that if we get another inspector in, this will help us meet the time frames. We were looking for a part-time, but also a part-timer with possibly multiple licenses, so it can help us out in the various codes where we're not just stuck into building. If we run backload in electrical, we can shift them over there to help out with that. That is pretty much the major change there. You'll see a change in other professional services. That has to do with software maintenance. There's been a mix-up between the software company and the Village of Ridgewood as far as billing goes, and we haven't been billed for the software maintenance for a number of years, so that item is coming up under other professional services. Other than that, everything's pretty flat from the year before.
Great, thanks so much. Can I open up to questions?
Mike, on the revenue side, did you say that the projected revenue of $935,000, which I understand is last year's revenue realized, we're not allowed to budget revenue that we didn't see actually come in a prior year, but are you saying that that is based on the same fee structure level without an increase in fees?
Correct. We have not increased fees. We pretty much maxed out the fees about 3 years ago when we did this. So it's very difficult to go beyond that. We keep an eye on some of the minor non-UCC type fees, but it's not anything that's going to generate a lot of money. So we're basically projecting that the volume, we can't project more than what we collected, the prior year.
So you're not requesting an increase in fees, you don't intend to, in the fee structure?
No, we feel the fee structure is adequately covering the costs. You want to relate to...
Yep.
I've made some comparisons.
I need you to use the microphone. Thanks.
I've made comparisons, and we're near the top for most of our fees. We're equal with some. We're higher than most, though, in comparable communities. So we're up there.
Right. I mean, in a sense, we have a captive market. If you want to put an addition on your home, you probably will not be stopped because the fees are Y instead of X. But on the other hand, I don't think we should be gouging our own citizenry who have no choice but to come to us. So I think your point's, I like the point that we're doing it on a comparative basis. We're not seeking to be the highest charging fee community in all of the world.
We did extensive studies when we revamped these, because it had been the first time in about 10 years that they had been modified. So we went out, looked at similar communities, looked at Bergen County, looked at communities that were dedicated by rider, ones that weren't, and we kind of settled in on this because it also met our financial needs, because we were looking to cover the costs of the department at the time.
And just an observation, and I'll cede the floor. I apologize for going on so long. You're one of the few profit centers in the village, in that you're looking at net revenue to us of $175,000, but that is $20,000, give or take, less than last year's profit, if you will. So I guess the question would be, is there some way we can at least target last year's profit? And I may not have the answer right offhand, but that would be a goal. I think it's a worthy goal not to show a reduced profit from last year, unless you think the volume that you're not allowed to project because of the way in which these budgets are done will get us there. You might be able to say that even though it can't be in the budget.
I don't think we have enough months in the year to kind of predict what that trend's going to be. I think when you get into the months of March and April, when the weather starts to turn better, you get an idea how busy we're going to be. So it's a little early to guess that. We hope that it's going to be that way. When you read all of the indicators out there, there's nothing that stands in the way of that, other than if the real estate market gets real hot and people start looking to purchase, what they now have to do to their home. So, it's a kind of a catch-22 there.
Just a couple of quick questions. You mentioned that the software company has not been billing us for several years. That obligation, where is that in this number here?
Well, the past obligation isn't in there. It's just the current, it's under the 028, which is account number, which is the
2,500, the other professional services?
The 2,500, correct.
So that includes it's just been rolled over? And
That's the annual fee.
That's the annual fee, so the years that we didn't pay, we didn't pay them, or they didn't ask to be paid, I guess is what?
No, if I can explain,
Sure.
there were no updates. We didn't have any problems to have to call them in, to look at our
Oh,
computers.
so there was no charge by them?
Well, there should have been, but they thought, and this is what we were told at the beginning of this year, they thought we weren't using their software anymore. They weren't contacting us, they weren't sending invoices to us, and we weren't calling them for any service. So, and we're just not even thinking about this, and we're going on our merry way using the software without any problems. So, plus, and it was taken out. We had it in, and I don't remember which year, but it was removed from the budget. I don't know I didn't even know about it. It was in, and then it was removed, and well, that's where.
So,
I think it was removed because it wasn't expended.
We weren't using it.
Yeah.
okay, so it's not in here, so now,
The back number is, the 2,500 is the cost that we have to pay now. We did have a problem.
Okay.
And we had to have them in, and then we
okay,
negotiated, and we're moving forward.
okay, so there's going to be no other obligation,
Not in the 14 budget.
Okay.
We paid
Okay.
the 13 fee out of the
Okay.
13 budget.
okay, great, that's all I had.
Go ahead.
Can I ask about the overtime charges? I mean, they're minimal, but I guess you'd probably like to talk about that.
The actual overtime charges are from property maintenance issues. Greg Moritz does the property maintenance for the village. This is people who don't shovel their sidewalks or don't mow the grass or garbage removal. So the costs in the overtime are his court costs when he has to go to court on Thursdays. That's primarily what the occasionally Carlo has to go into court, so there'll be some minimal charges there, but the majority of the charges are from property maintenance. He doesn't have a separate budget for that, so it comes out of the UCC, where property maintenance was always located.
We normally did property maintenance in our department. We always had it as a line item. We just left it there.
And it's up a little bit this year, but
It's up. He's been more busy. There's been more court times. We've had some cases that have required longer days with the judge. I think we all know a lot of those cases.
yeah.
And so most of them are worked out, but we have another one that we're anticipating is going to cost us some more
Thank you very
issues.
much. And then I guess I also noticed that there's an increase in private permit fees and a decrease in public permit fees. And since it's a great revenue source, I was wondering if you noticed the trend and if there's any explanation for it? The handout that Mike passed out?
You're talking about the number.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's basically, I would assume that's the Board of Ed.
Schools, the village, those permits, and we don't even collect revenues for although we collect,
Yep.
we collect, from the Board of Ed, we collect a percentage of what the permit would be for plan review. We cannot collect permit fees otherwise from any government entity. So public is the village, we issue permits to the village, and the Board of Ed. So there aren't that many revenues coming in.
It's not public, meaning like a business or something.
No, no, no.
So it's in other words,
It's government.
government, okay. And have you noticed that there's a big difference between then residential versus commercial?
Thank you.
I'm just curious on the sidebar.
In,
Is one more profitable
in permit revenue or in the number of permits?
revenue?
It's hard to say. We calculate fees different ways. We calculate fees based on estimated costs, and we also calculate based on the volume. So if you're building new buildings, it's one number, which is usually less, a lower number. It's just hard to say. I
Okay.
could go through it and get it all for you.
Yeah.
But right now, it just depends on how
It's-
many jobs are going on and what the costs of those jobs are on the commercial end. And usually at the residential end, we look at the volume of new buildings and additions and things like that.
And not with commercial?
Well, if a
Because
new
it's
building
too
is being
high.
built,
Yeah, it depends on the size.
it'll depend on the size, and then we'll charge according to the volume. That's just the way state tells us to do it. We get less revenue that way, but...
Thanks. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, guys, for your presentation. Just two questions, one specific follow-up from Gwen's, and then more general question. In terms of the overtime, and you said a lot of that overtime, if not all of it, is attributable to coming to court.
Correct.
And do you have to come to court every week? I mean, is there a way, knowing that that's going to be an expense that's part of someone's job, is there a way to sort of fold that into sort of their job rather than making that overtime every week?
Well,
Actually, with the job itself, we folded property maintenance into another job. So Greg works as an inspector and oversees, supervises some of the sites in town, the recycling center, and works with Bob Labita there. So what happened when Steve retired, our animal control officer, Steve Widener, he used to do that while he was out on the road doing his dog inspection work. So what we're trying to do is take advantage of people who are on the road and do multiple functions, but only really he's compensated for the one. So when he goes to court, it's after his 8 hours of working on the job. So it's difficult to say, well, look, come in late one day when he has the responsibility to.
Sure, I appreciate that, but overtime costs more than the normal per hour that we're paying an employee. So if we know that they're going to be going to court every week or every 2 weeks, it would seem that, okay, sort of revisit that and see if there's a way to sort of fold it into.
We could see if there's another way we could look at it. It's every, during the summer months, it's probably every week about an hour and a half time. This time of year, it's not as much. It starts to pick up, when the...
Yeah, so if you could look into that.
We could revisit that.
And that goes to one of my general question. Over the last few years, and particularly last year when department heads came to us for the budget, we asked everybody to sort of try to think differently, to think of ways that you could do your jobs, faster, smarter, better. Can you give us some examples of things you've done and sort of some of the outcomes of that, whether things have worked, things haven't worked? Have you realized any savings, both in time or money, or anything you can sort of shed light on would be helpful?
In this particular department, it's just trying to keep afloat. There's a lot of activity. We had some personnel changes that occurred during the year that we didn't expect, with one of the part-time employees taking a full-time job. We finally have replaced an individual. So we are looking at whenever there are ideas. I know that ideas have been sent on to us about ways to look at what we do, the way some of the other states are doing it. I know there were some things from Arizona and out in the Midwest on how they're looking at it. It's really just the paper flow.
I know one of the things we tried was the tracking system online. How's that going?
Yeah, I was going to mention that we've streamlined that process when a permit comes in, and it's route through our department, through individual reviewing officials. We keep track of that much more efficiently. Plus, the public can now also go online and look to see where their permit is in that process. It seems to help us. Our bigger problem is having things that we cannot issue permits for. Missing, I know we've talked about the missing information, we've got to make a phone call, and we have to wait for it to come back. We can't sign off and issue a permit if it's not code compliant on paper. And so things sit in the office mainly for that reason. And that puts it, that puts the kibosh on smoothly flowing things when we have to stop and wait for information to come in.
And speaking on, some of the things that we've met with the members of the council on, we talked about the,
I had that same problem.
We talked about the process of going through approvals. We spent a lot of time with members of the business community on that. We addressed how we do things, looked to see whether or not our processes were being followed, whether there were any ways for improvement. I believe out of that, there's been some modifications to the site plan exemption committee and some of the to speed up the process of getting it into the permitting phase on it. And you're always looking for ways to improve that end of it. Communication with the other departments. There is some interaction between engineering and building on projects. Recycling, there has to be forms that have to be, and in some cases, even the health department has to do reviews on plans. So we're trying to keep those communication lines better. Ultimately, if you had the resources, doing all this stuff electronically, would be.
Let's do that, and I appreciate that point. And let's, if we could, I know we placed some emphasis on it over the last year, but if we could sort of redouble our efforts in that regard. I know the incoming village manager, she wants to talk to you guys about this and really play in premium on making your office, not only more user-friendly for the residents, but also, more effective, more efficient, that will help you and your staff do your jobs better and faster. And so, but we can continue that conversation. But anyway, that's all I have for now. Anybody else?
I see we have Janet Willett from the Financial Advisory Committee here, and the Financial Advisory Committee had proposed a format for presenting the budgets, and as this is our first one, Janet, I guess I would ask you whether this format is what was proposed by the Financial Advisory Committee.
You should probably have her come up.
If you wouldn't mind coming forward and addressing the question.
Anyway, let me thank you guys. Appreciate it.
We have zoning.
Oh, okay.
We'll try to be quick.
I would say, compared to previous years, there's been good progress. We're seeing now.
Janet, we can't hear you.
Sorry, I would say compared to previous years, there's been good progress. We're seeing pension numbers now, healthcare costs by department apparently. It isn't quite where we had hoped we would be at this point. We were looking for one page that had head count, historical numbers, sort of a bottom line number. But, it looks like it's coming.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And I know it's going to be an ongoing process,
right.
with the FAC. Thanks, Janet. Thank you. Thanks for being here this evening and tracking this process.
All right, so we'll move on to the next one.
Right. It's zoning.
Yeah. Zoning board primarily deals with residents and business applications for variances, seeking relief from our zoning ordinances. It's a board that is independent of the office itself, but we provide services to them, such as the clerical services. There's really no revenue here. The monies that are taken in go into escrow accounts that cover the costs of the professionals that are required, our board attorney. And then the last couple years, we have not had any staff. What's been happening is Tony, as the board secretary and the zoning officer, has all the responsibilities have fallen on him to put together the meeting packets, make sure applications are complete, make sure the public notices are done, and prepare the agendas as well as the minutes for the meetings. And we're having some trouble doing that. With the other titles that he has, there's just not enough hours in the day. All along, we've had a full-time clerical position associated with the board that handled a lot of these administrative tasks, which freed up Tony to do the review of the minutes, as well as making sure that the applications are correct and the legal advertisements are done proper. So we are asking again in this year's budget to have a dedicated clerical person to provide these functions for the zoning board. We are also asking for a part-time zoning officer. It would be a assistant zoning officer. The titles that we have in the budget right now need to be worked a little. The secretary board / commissions is the actual clerk, the zoning board clerk, and then the zoning board secretary, it's actually an assistant zoning officer. One of the areas when we talk about efficiencies and clogs within the overall hall department, because these zoning is integrated with the building department, because you have to have zoning before you can get through to the building part of it. And we seem to have a delay in the zoning. It's taking us longer to get the applications out of zoning to get to the permit phase. So we've identified that area where if we had an assistant that would help in that, that also frees up time to do inspections. Right now, we haven't had the time to be proactive in our zoning around town. We're more of a reactive when a trouble comes up, instead of being out there and looking to see that everything's done.
If I could just add one thing, which I didn't realize myself, every single application, correct me if I'm wrong, that goes to the building department has to go through zoning first. So Tony is a zoning officer, so he has to review every one of those applications, and then it goes out to the subcode officials and different officials. So every single piece of application that comes in has to go to zoning first. And because he's one person, by doing this, with a part-time person, it would free up this process to allow it to move forward more quickly, and it can get out to the other inspectors more quickly.
Now, granted, some of those it comes in, it's for a roof, no zoning needed, but he has to look at it to determine whether or not a full zoning review needs to be had. So, some of them move very quickly, roofs, things like that, so it's not being held up there because there's no zoning review required. We try to move those type of permits out very, very quickly, so they're not hanging around.
So because that doesn't seem like a good use of Tony's time. I know you're sitting right here. But why are you doing that now?
Has to be done, Mayor.
Have you always done it?
When there was a full-time board clerk,
I think he's talking about the zoning.
Yeah.
zoning, not the zoning board.
Right.
No, I'm the only person that can do. I have the title. Paula in my office, if something comes to the counter that's very easily reviewed and approved, she can do that right away. That'll eliminate it going into my zoning box. An air conditioning compressor or a condensing unit or a generator, those are really simple things. A driveway, if you want to widen the driveway, it's very easy to look at it and say, okay, that's 1, 2, 3, and she can do that for me. Otherwise, if it's an addition where I have to calculate lot coverage and gross building area and things like that, that takes time.
And to answer the question is yes, he's done that.
sorry.
As long as I can remember, before he became the construction code official, he was also doing the zoning reviews as well as building inspections itself. And then when we had a retiree that occurred, and excuse my voice,
I've been a zoning officer since 1988. I've done zoning since then.
To follow on the mayor's question, I understand you're the zoning officer, but why do you have to be the secretary of the Board of Adjustment?
When I became the zoning officer, I also became secretary to the board at the same time. And those are the only two tasks I had. But we had a full-time clerk at the same time as well. And it's traditionally how it's been done for the village for many, many years before my time here. I have a comparison, and Mayor, you asked for it last year. It was never given to you. I compared other building departments, and I did 8 or 9 of them, and I have them here. And except for Fairlawn, every one I did, there's no zoning, there's no zoning officer, there's no zoning board in the building department. All they do is the UCC stuff, the new construction stuff, and which is really the way it should be, but it can work. And the whole problem is personnel. There's just so many little things that have to go on with both zoning and the zoning board, and it always worked here. It worked well, but traditionally it's been my job since 88. Since 1988, I was bumped up, and I'm doing it ever since.
It seems that, Tony, you're an expert in zoning. I mean, I know that. I know you know the code and the UCC in particular. To me, it seems like a distraction and the possible cause of bottleneck in the building department if your time and attention is also directed towards assembling a package for a quasi-judicial body that meets twice a month and then worrying about the minutes for that body, getting those minutes out, and attending those meetings, which are at least twice a month, and they tend to be, long meetings. I was on the zoning board, as you know, for many years. I would hope that we would look at whether that is an appropriate use of your time, i.e. that you should be the secretary of the Board of Adjustment. That, to me, seems like a very different function than what you are doing during the day and managing. And really, you're the throughput throttle for the building department. Things go as fast as you can get to them. We don't have 5 zoning offices. I mean, ultimately, you're the Court of Appeals on zoning issues and building permit issues. You're the Supreme Court in the building department. People need your time and attention there. I don't know that we need your time and attention as Secretary of the Board of Adjustment. It strikes me that is a very separate function that can be done. Not that you're not the best person to do it, but the law of comparative advantage says just because you're the best person that can do a particular job, you should do the job that you are comparatively more important to, better at, and that's being zoning officer. Let somebody else, who may not even be as good as Secretary of the Board of Adjustment, do that job. I mean, it's a basic economic principle. I don't think you should be doing both.
Let me ask you a question. So you've been doing this ever since you've been in this position. You've been the board secretary also.
I've been zoning board secretary, zoning officer. I became both at the same time, yes.
And the proposal is to have someone else be the board secretary is that correct? Or?
The attendance at meetings that doesn't interfere with my zoning work, which I actually enjoy doing because I can sit up here and wear 3 hats. So you can ask questions as the construction official, as the zoning officer, and as the zoning board secretary. The position that we're looking at, and which we had for many years, was basically administrative. And those packages, the pigeonholes we have downstairs where we put the package together, we send it out to board members and all, that I call it a clerk. The official state title is secretary. And the administrative title that we use is board clerk.
So I'm just trying to understand, because you've got 2 line items here. One's $26,000, one's
It's basically a clerical person to assemble the board packets,
both of
to
these?
take in the applications, to prepare the minutes, and I think she also attended the meetings, right, and ran the recording system. Is that correct?
We did together, yes. She
Okay.
also attended.
And then Tony acted as the secretary, and he gave the advice as the zoning officer, the construction code official, and what was the third one?
Zoning officer.
Zoning officer, and then in addition to that would be a full-time clerical position to do that. The thing about that clerical position, if the building department gets very busy, that person can also help out in the building department area. Then, in addition, they're asking for a part-time zoning officer because every single application that goes into the building department needs to be seen by the zoning officer. And, in addition, even though Tony is the full-time zoning officer, he's also the full-time construction code official and the full-time director of the department. By having this part-timer in there, those zoning applications, every single permit that comes in is going to be moved more quickly, and then also free him up to do possibly more construction code.
Sure, what I'm trying to get at, though, what you're saying is take some of the clerical work that Tony's doing now and have a clerk, do that job for
Correct, for the zoning board.
$26,000. Is that the,
No.
No.
okay.
35.
Let me clarify, because the titles that are on here, we didn't get fixed. The first title that you see here that says zoning board secretary should be assistant zoning officer,
And that's part-time.
at part-time at $26,000 a year. The secretary board/commission is a full-time position at $35,348, of which we're budgeting 7 months this year in anticipation that the budget would be adopted in May. If it's not, well, then it would be less.
So this part-time assistant zoning officer would presumably take some of the clerical work that Tony's now responsible for off his hands, and
No, the
No.
full-time...
the full-time
The
one would.
full-time secretary
person.
board would.
Right.
The other person would assist in the zoning reviews.
Got it, okay.
For every application that comes in.
So to go back to the point that myself and the deputy mayor were making in terms of the best use of Tony's time, you're saying take some of the clerical responsibilities away from him and give it to somebody who's going to be doing part-time. Is there, because of Tony's position, because of your position, I'll talk to you in third person, as the secretary, do you get like an additional stipend? Is there something in your salary? I mean, because now what we're doing is what you're proposing is that we sort of create this new position. It's going to be taking some of his responsibility away, hopefully freeing up his time. But is there anything in his job, as board secretary, that he's getting extra for?
My salary is one number that encompasses all the positions that I do. I don't take a piece of salary from the UCC, for instance, from our revenue, and then a piece from the zoning board revenue. It had to, should there be enough for that. But I have one salary. I don't make an extra stipend for anything that's actually written or spelled
You do
out.
what your job is, and now
I do all my jobs for.
And now we're trying to find a better use.
We're trying to find a better use for his time.
Got it.
And again, that's always the way it's been. And when we had the full-time clerical person, it worked, but as we don't have that staff to assist, that's where we're finding
And
one
my
of the
last
issues.
question, just on this, just to clarify, so when we did have that other person working, they weren't doing the packets as the deputy mayor sort of described. I mean, they were doing it, you weren't doing it, but since that person left, you've been doing that.
Correct.
Yes, sir.
Okay, great, thank you, I appreciate it. I'm sorry for...
I don't really have any questions. I think that this makes a lot of sense, what you're planning. I think we talked about it last year, and maybe even since I've been on the council, that Tony, as the zoning official, has been spread thin. It was always a matter of what we had in the budget, and I think now that we're reorganizing some things, he is the zoning official. That is by code and by statute that he has to see all the applications that we talked about. So I think this will actually be a good move forward, because as people start to renovate in place as opposed to moving out, which is something we like to see, it'll make the process smoother. So I'm in favor of it.
Mayor, question about the revenues. You don't show any revenues for the zoning board, or Board of Adjustment. there are application fees and there are escrow fees and like as there are on the planning board. Why are those not reflected here in the budget? Well, application fees. For example, I mean, just as a for instance, they're not included on in a revenue. You show zero revenue for the Board of Adjustment, but in fact there is some revenue generation by the Board of Adjustment.
Let's have Steve answer that.
So,
the sheets that I prepared basically left the zoning board escrow fees off because they support the other fees that are charged to the applicants, like engineering and the attorney's fees that come out of the trust fund. There might be some application fees, which I could not, separate them from the other fees in our admin system. So I'll go back and look at those fees. But there is a significant amount in the trust fund that's from the applicants. It's usually like $700, depending on the size of the project.
right. But those fees are reflected somewhere else.
In the trust fund, and they're offsetting.
And then they're allocated out to the engineering department, to...
They're not always allocated out. The planning board, yes, but in the zoning board, most of those fees are directly to the attorneys, and maybe if there's a, special professional that's required on a particular job, then they're covered.
So they go to outside services, and they don't help to absorb the net cost of this department, which is shown at $64,000 of expenses.
And that's one thing that maybe the zoning board can look at and come up with a fee, just like the planning board does for reviewing of applications. I know the engineering department, as well as Blaze's time, is charged to the applicants.
Yeah. I mean, at a minimum, the application fee itself for the Board of Adjustment should go to offset the $64,000 gross expenditure.
Well, yeah, like I said, a majority of the money is in the trust fund. That's why I didn't show the trust funds, because I don't want to be misleading.
Got it. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor, I was just whispering with Tony here, and we can go back and try to isolate what the actual application fee is. It's not like you can take one application because, as you know, sitting there, if it's got multiple variances, there's one fee there. But Tony said we could possibly get that information where, you can.
And I know the fee isn't a lot, but the Board of Adjustment, unlike Planning Board, has a lot of throughput. You do a lot of volume. I don't know, 5, 6, 10 applications, I remember, some nights in...
Okay.
Per night, per night, no, not per year, no.
Yeah.
And those, I don't know what the order of magnitudes of those fees are, something like, I don't know, $100 or...
A basic bulk variance is $200.
$200.
A use is $5, so it's per variance.
So if you're doing, 7, 8 applications a night, it's maybe a couple of $1,000s per meeting of fees. Well, no, because some of the applications are repeated meeting to meeting. But there is certainly some revenue generation just in the form of application fees that could be reflected to show that the real cost of this department may not be $64,000, it may be $48,000, something like that.
We'll go back and we'll have that information for you.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to further scrutiny of the building department. I understand that there's some issues with customer satisfaction, and it may be because you're understaffed, but I also think that the tracking program, I wanted to check that out and see why that isn't working. I know you say people aren't really using it because there's some kind of a waylay between we don't know where things fall by the wayside along the way. It's because people aren't finishing their applications or fulfilling their obligations, so it gets stalled in the process, and we can only do what we can do. But I think the tracking process has to be more accurate, and I'm looking forward to working with the building department to try to streamline your situation. But I'm not sure if just increasing staffing is the solution. I think management is part of the problem, and I'm looking forward to the new village manager having an opportunity to work together with you and try to understand all the nuances in the department.
If I just may make a very quick comment, what we found with the tracking system is that the majority of the permits that are issued are going to the contractors. So when the information is being given, it's not getting passed on to the homeowner that wants to keep track of what's going on. It's going to the actual contractor. So we need to address a better way of educating the public into that this tool is available, and finding maybe a better delivery way to get it to the people. Because that's one of the growth things that we found in this now that we've been doing it, I guess well over a year, is that the homeowner doesn't know about this. And as soon as they find out about it, they go, oh, wow, great. So that's a disconnect that we've found and we need to address.
Thank you.
Just building on that point that Councilwoman Houck brought up, and I sort of spoke to this a few minutes ago, I think the point is there's got to be a better way to do this. And I say that because I know you guys are frustrated. You feel like you need more staffing. You guys are always under the gun and under a lot of pressure, and it doesn't seem to be working ideally from your perspective. And from the residents' perspective, it's not working ideally. From the businesses, it's not working. So we've got to fix it. We know there's a problem. We know there's probably a series of problems, probably not one silver bullet solution, but we really need to sort of double down a little bit and focus a little bit more going forward. And I know we can work together. We started to, and I think we just got to find, again, for everyone's sake, your sake, the residents' sake, the business's sake. So I think that's I just wanted to say that about the councilwoman point. Going back to something the deputy mayor was talking about, absorbing these additional costs. I appreciate you going back and looking if we can absorb it within the zoning board fees, but some of the additional expense you're asking for would also be helping the building department per se, right? With some of the work you were talking about. Have you thought about absorbing some of that cost within the building department itself?
We're looking at one of the ways that we charge our zoning review fee, which currently on a project, somebody comes in, gets a building permit, there's no separate zoning fee for that because they're getting a building permit. If it's just a zoning review, there's the ability to charge for that in our fee structure. So we're looking to see how we can bring in a fee structure for this where it's not a flat fee. We have to be very careful because sometimes a zoning review could just be a quick look at it and it's a sign-off versus something that takes a couple hours to do calculations and review. So it is something that Tony and I have discussed. We don't have any real numbers on it yet.
Okay, appreciate it. Yeah, because it's the point that Deputy Mayor made. You guys are a profit center, and so if you need additional staff, if you have additional expenditures, it'd be great to find a way to pay for it, with your own fund. So rather than sort of having another department bear that cost or something.
So it's there. We're working on it. We don't have any real numbers yet to kind of throw out. We do get numbers of how many zoning reviews we do, but we don't know whether they're complex or simple zoning. So it's something that we are investigating.
Okay, great.
And we talked about for a while.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions? Well, thank you. Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Appreciate it.
Our next department is the Health Department.
Enjoy.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome.
How is everybody tonight?
Good.
And you?
Very good, thanks.
I actually have a wedding at 7 o'clock. I'm going to bring in more money for the health department.
We only make $3 on the weddings, though.
Increase the revenue.
There you go.
Increase the fees.
It's $3 for 20 minutes, I don't know. First, I just wanted to talk about some of the things that I wanted to do this year to increase our revenue, as increasing the restaurant license fees, food establishments and restaurants. We haven't increased them in 7 years, so we're looking to do approximately a $50 increase per establishment. And the second thing is to increase dry cleaner fees, because it's been about 9 years since we've increased them. And there are more regulations now with the dry cleaners that we have to look at. So we spend a little bit more time out on our inspections. And some of my reductions, some of the things are from last year, but just to mention them because they've been successful programs, is when we did a 3-year dog license. That was a really great program. It saved us a lot of time, increased our revenue, it was a lot more efficient. And we also used an email system to do the dog licenses, which worked out really wonderfully, actually. We're also incorporating to do emails for the restaurants regarding food handling classes, restaurant renewals, recalls, anything we need to get in touch with them for, which has been something we're pretty much ready to do. The other thing is, because of the 3-year dog license being such a success, we want to incorporate it into the cat licenses, which we don't have as many, but it just really, it makes it so much more efficient to think about it every 3 years. And emailing the cat license renewals as well. We've been collecting email addresses in that program. Oh, and the other thing is, I've been talking with Dylan about possibly taking credit cards. I know that was something that was brought up before, because we used to have the ATM in the building, so we would send people downstairs. But if we could take credit cards, I think as far as our accounting, it would save us a lot of time. It would be a lot more convenient, because a lot of times we have moms coming in with a stroller, and then they have to go across the street to King's or to the bank to get money. So we're trying to avoid that. So there is like a way to do a PayPal account with credit cards, and that'll help increase. And then staffing.
Just one thing with the revenues here, and when we look again at the health department is actually made up of a number of different tasks that they have. We have the vital statistics, we have the retail inspection end of it, and we also have the dog licensing end of it. When you're looking at the health department anticipated revenues here, you're not looking at the dog and cat revenues in there. But yet the office time and energy and supplies is coming out of the health department. And it's because the money goes into a trust.
Right.
And then from the trust, we pay the animal control officers and any costs that are associated with we pay the state fees out of that. But we just wanted to point out is that the revenues aren't in here because it has to be dedicated some other place, but the staff is utilizing and collecting those revenues, but it's not shown on this main sheet here.
And they're approximately $60,000. Okay, so back to staff. Oh, do you have a question? Just back to staffing. We have a part-time deputy registrar who's working 27 hours for the village, and I'm requesting for Mary, her name is Mary, for her to be increased to 35 hours. She already actually has benefits through the village of Ridgewood, so therefore she would not be entitled to the stipend because her husband actually works for the village. And if we were able to increase the hours with Mary, that would eliminate the need to have the part-time temporary assistance, which was, I think, $2,600 was in there. As long as we can still continue to have the crossing guard program, which has been very successful. We have set employees that come in over the summer and help us process the dog licenses. And also we have Chris from tax department who helps us enter our births. And we also actually have Yendi from building department who helps us mail, because we have to mail the birth certificates, which we do about 3,000 a year. We have to mail them to the town that the people live in, so Yendi does that. Yeah, so they've been helping us.
Just to help you follow along here is that if you go to the page that has the number of personnel the second page where it has the salaries and wages. The individual that we're talking about is the second one down. It's shown already as an employee, as a clerk typist part-time. And then on the bottom, you'll see what the additional 8-hour cost would be. And as Dawn had said, there's no cost with the benefits other than the FICA.
And just to mention some other things, I'd like to continue the Responsible Pet Ownership Committee, which is shown to be very successful. And we have some programs, upcoming first aid for your pet, and free microchipping. And all of this doesn't cost us anything. I send all the information out through email, and we have volunteers that help us with this. And of course, the wellness, which is a new initiative, just to increase that with the employees and with the town. The community. We have different programs like the Weight Loss Challenge and the Lunch and Learn programs, monthly blood pressure, and the Walking Club. And so far, they haven't cost us any funding for doing these programs, working with Valley. So.
That's great.
Oh, and our new walking program that we're working on.
Great, thank you. So, questions? Albert, do you have any?
Yeah, I get, you're doing a great job with a very small amount of money. I realize that at the same time, there is a $24,000 increase over last year, and the net cost to the village will have doubled in 2 years, right? From $63,000 to $130,000, more than doubled. So, those are observations. I'm not sure where the answer is. I do see this $5,500 in other expenses, $5,500 increase in the other expenses category. A little here, a little there. Maybe we can get rid of that $24,000, increase over last year's budget. I don't know what's in that line, so it's hard to.
Sure, where
You're showing $15,570 versus last year $10,126.
Oh, okay. Oh, yes. Some of the things with that is basically what happens is we put money in the budget for septic inspection. That's just one example. And if we don't use it, if we don't happen to have an inspector, we don't need that money. So I didn't spend it last year. I did, however, spend it the year before. So we do put that in the budget. What was the other one that we were talking about? I think I have that on the different page.
Well, it's not, I don't want to take too much more time on it. It's a small item. But the point I'm trying to make is that when your total increase in the budget is only $24,000, it would be, extremely helpful to the whole process if that was zero.
Right,
and to get that to zero, I'm not sure where you can find $5,000 here and $6,000 there. Some of these costs are baked in, and we have no choice. Well,
under training, though, it actually said $8,000, but it was only supposed to be $3,500. So that was one of the things I noticed that was an error that was put in there.
Yeah. And the fact that the deficit, if you will, or the net cost to the village has gone from $62,877, that is your expenses minus your revenues, in 2012 to $130,233 in 2014, and last year we had a zero tax increase. That is twice the cost of the village in a 2-year period, which suggests to me, maybe it's the fee levels are too low. This is a department the expense of which to operate is going up by 100%.
Yeah, unfortunately, our fee levels are pretty maxed out. Our dogs are maxed out. Our birth certificates, we're the highest. I've polled other towns. We are actually the highest. Even our retail is high, and I'm increasing that.
The other problem that we run into here is just like in the building department, you're relying on a fee that somebody else has to make a decision on. And in this particular case, somebody either has to have a baby, somebody has to get married, and unfortunately, somebody has to die. And that's, or open up a business. And, once you get established businesses, you don't get that continuing, you get the revenue every year, but you don't get that hit. If you look at the difference between the 12 and the 13 revenue, you see a
I was
tremendous.
going to ask you, do you know why that is? I mean,
Tremendous drop.
Some of the reasons, actually, I did take some notes on it. With the retail, about $10,000 of that, I can tell you, was just our processing. They're due December 31st, and we weren't able to process them until 2014. So the first month in 2014, we actually have $10,000 more in our revenue. So that is one of the reasons. Again, some businesses, we have less businesses that are in town right now, so we do see a decrease in that. And as far as with the vital statistics, actually there's a 10% decrease in deaths that happened, which is a positive.
Good thing.
It's a very good thing, yeah. Because births are actually,
I assure you it's well, but it is at best
yeah, but
temporary.
it's actually 10% less. There was about 1,000 deaths in 2012 and about 900 in 2013, which is just remarkable.
aberration.
Yeah. So we're going to sell a lot less death certificates. We did see an increase over the past few years in birth certificates because motor vehicles, passport office, and insurance, as you know, government employees were all audited. So everybody was coming in getting their birth certificates. Now that's all kind of settled down. So we do see a little bit less with that. But the births are actually still up. So
one of the questions I was going to ask you is with the 3-year dog license. I mean, that's good. It's like a happy now but sad later, right? Because we get the additional revenue up front.
well,
right?
it's not offered at a discount. So it's not that if you buy it now you save money in the long run. You're paying the same fee as if you would pay it
Do
in
they
3
pay it
different
on an
years.
annual basis, or do they pay it all at once?
They pay it all at once,
That's what
but then the next, so we sold 400 the first year, the second year we sold 300, the third year, hopefully we'll sell.
My question is, so if they're paying for a 3-year license, do you divide that over the 3 years, or is that just a lump sum that year we benefit?
It was a lump sum, but we also have, it's on a rolling basis, so as you get your shot, you can get that this year, but then the next year, people are eligible, and then the next year, people are eligible. So it kind of balances out. This is our 3rd year. So then next year, it'll start again where they're purchasing the new 3-year after they've already purchased one. So it's not like you can only get it the first year. You
No,
get
I'm
it.
saying, I was just curious, when you rolled out this program, was there like a spike in sort of, fees that we're getting?
There was, yeah.
And so that would then lead to maybe a drop off the subsequent year, because people already have their...
It led to a drop just because we didn't sell as many. We sold 400 the first year and maybe 300 the second year. So I think the hype kind of died out a little bit.
And again, it's not in any of these numbers.
Yeah, it's not showing in
It's
there.
under the dog trust.
Right.
So we don't have those numbers. At this point, we haven't seen a significant drop-off. I think once we get through the first 3-year cycle, we can see how and get a track record of, what we sold the first year, what was the second year revenues. And then as we still sell more than there, you'll get somebody who didn't do it, who didn't take advantage the first time that now wants to
does,
come
yeah.
in and do it.
And the key is the labor. I mean, it saved us so much time and labor of processing. That was the main reason why I did it.
No, I would just, I made observations, I wish I had the answers for you, but you are showing about, an 18% increase in the cost to the village from last year, and more than 100% increase in the cost to the village from 2 years ago. I understand these are small amounts of money, relatively, but, it adds up department to department. 130,000 versus 63,000 from 2 years ago. It's not an insignificant increase over a 2-year period. I'm not being critical, I'm just making the observation that somehow or another we can't experience that kind of growth anywhere in the village. If that was if that was $13 million, I mean, it would be out of the question, and we shouldn't matter where the decimal is. I mean, we still have to be concerned about that magnitude of increase.
Deputy Mayor, what we could possibly do is go back and look at 5 years and see whether that 1 year was just an anomaly,
maybe.
and see whether or not there's what happened the prior years before. Then maybe we can quantify just that one. There may be an answer there. There may not be an answer, but if we looked at a larger sampling, we could maybe find some answers. So we can do that.
Can I ask a question about the the money that's held in escrow for the licensing, that's held in escrow so that you can pay out for what?
To pay out for the animal control officer, it's the dog trust.
The dog trust.
Yes,
So what
Steve.
percentage of that do you end up recouping and when? I mean,
In the animal control budget, there's a $30,000 allocation from the dog trust fund, which sets the Bergen County contract that the village has with the county to pick up stray animals and things of that nature. And that replaced the animal control officer that we had maybe 2 years ago when Steve was here.
It's been about 5.
right.
Oh, it's been
4 or
that.
5, yeah.
Do we ever get the slush back, or no, it stays
Well,
in that trust?
basically, the village is entitled to X amount of dollars of each dog license that's issued and cat license. That goes into the trust fund. The other portion of the license fee goes to the state of New Jersey, and then the village's share offsets the operations for animal control. There's really no allocation that goes to the health department for issuing.
So that could never be built into the budget?
Historically, based on the contract, what we take out of the trust fund it's a wash almost. I could look and
Okay.
see
Yeah, that's all.
if there's any additional
It doesn't
funding.
really seem fair, but I don't know. That obviously, it has to pay for expenses, but
Yeah, the
if
big
there's a
expense.
positive balance, if there's always a rolling positive balance, that would be great to be able to allocate some back into the health department. And my only other question is that there was a big spike in contractual services. Do you know what that is? Is it anything notable? It's only $2,000, but it's 700% increase.
Which one are we talking about?
I don't know
Line
what
29.
contractual services is.
Wait, let me get my thing.
029.
I have my notes on here.
We're dealing with the new forms.
Oh, that was what I was referring to. That was from 2100 to 23? That was for the septic was in there.
Oh, okay.
That was one of the things, like I said, we didn't really spend that, but we did spend it in 2012, but we didn't spend it in 2013.
Thanks.
But it depends if we needed an inspector. And paper went up, different things like that. And I also want to point out the manager's course, we made a profit of food handlers classes as $4,600 so this year for just doing the food handler classes.
Nope, I don't have any questions.
The only other questions I have are, you talked about increasing restaurant fees, cleaner fees. Is that reflected in these numbers?
No.
The numbers that you see here are just carried over from last year.
Right.
So if we increase fees, then that would, we're assuming that the revenues would go up.
So a restaurant fee, what is a restaurant fee now?
$380, usually food establishment and restaurant, the most common number is $380.
That's annual? Mm-hmm. And so you're proposing increase it by 50?
$50, but I also, one of the things I really want to do is, because they were paying an ICE license, which has been in effect, and I know it's caused a lot of confusion, it's a lot of extra paperwork, so I just want to roll in that ICE license into the retail fee, just to make it a clean license fee for everyone. So some people might not see the $50 increase, they might only see the $25 if they were already paying the $25 for the ICE license.
And the cleaner fee, how much is that now?
$75,
And you propose to increase it
$125,
to $125?
yeah, to $125, $50, yeah.
And have you guys done the math on what that would, presumably bring in?
About $2,000 for the restaurants and maybe $500 for the dry cleaners. Minimal, it's been a while since we've increased them. That's why I thought it would be time to do some increases, but, we didn't want to do too much of an increase.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Well, thank you. Thanks for all your work on with dogs, particularly, and with wellness. We're keeping you busy, but thank you.
Good, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, good night.
Okay, the next department is tax assessor.
It's like the Mike Barker night.
Thank you.
And we're doing police and fire.
Increase, yeah, we should do it.
Give us some good news.
Now I have my tax assessor hat on. How's that? Good news. It was a great year in 2013 from a market standpoint. You know, the market sprang back real nice. Having done the reassessment put us in a good position moving forward to defend the assessment base. We will still have appeals. We were just talking about one that just, you scratch your head sometimes, but it's the people's rights to file them, so we're anticipating a lower number. Last year, we only ended up with 74, which about a third of them were withdrawn once they found out that they had filed the appeal on last year's number, and this year's number was down. We're still working on a backload from the 2009-2010 from the commercial base. They're slowly getting away. Matt Rogers, the village attorney, and myself, we work on these cases together, trying to do it in the most efficient way. And I'm actually meeting with him. I was supposed to meet with him today, but I've been a little under the weather, so we're rescheduling for Monday. And we're going to look at our process again to see if we can streamline it, make sure we're not stepping on each other's toes and duplicating procedures within it. We are getting into the county tax board time right now. So what I handed out here is my office does not have a traditional revenue source that you count on every year, such as fees and permits and construction type of thing. What we do, though, that does bring money into the coffer, shall we say, is when we pick up added assessments during the year. In other words, when somebody starts a project and finishes it in the middle of the year, their assessment has already been established. So we modify the assessment and bill them for the portion of when it was complete. That revenue is unanticipated revenue and goes into surplus for the following year. So in a sense, I'm creating revenue. Now, there's no way of predicting this because, again, it's coming from construction permits, and there's a lot of things that can affect it, but I wanted to give you an idea of where that revenue has been since I've been here. I started in November of 1993, and you can see the overall average. You can see a 6-year average, a 3-year average. So, I mean, we're talking anywhere from on a 6-year of $224,000 up to the overall average of almost $279,000. Now, that's total. If you look at the next column, that's the share that we get, because some of this goes to the county. So that goes from $200,000 up to a high of $249,000. But it doesn't show up anywhere. I just wanted to make the council aware that there is some revenue being generated from the office itself, but it doesn't show up in the current year. It always goes to the following year. That being said, we try to keep things as stagnant as possible. I want to point out that there is a decrease. Primarily, that's because the first year of the reassessment payment was in the budget in 2012. So 13 went back to the normal cycle of what we've been asking for. And then the 2014 shows some slight increases. We had a postage increase. My software maintenance went up $100. I'm anticipating the cost of toner to be about $100 more. It's pretty much, we still have the same staffing levels. I'm not asking for any additional staff. My assistant now helps other departments out, helps out in the finance, helps out in health department, and we're trying to assist wherever, we can. But the staffing, we've been able to make do.
Questions?
Yep. Just two quick questions for you. So the 74 appeals that were for 2013, the 74 appeals?
Yes, they were county tax board appeals, I should.
Okay, and then what, were there any paybacks to any of those people that won the appeals? And do you know what the total was on that?
There were some. I do not have the total. I can run that information and pass that on through Heather.
Okay, and then the only other question which I have each year, because we get the Matt's bills monthly in terms of what the legal services cost, and it's broken out specifically for tax appeals, and I still am curious as to why that's not into this analysis, because I think that we can get a better picture of what we're, if, I don't know what the number is here for what we have lost in appeals, but then we also have this added cost of what it costs us to defend ourselves in these appeals. So if that number is creeping up and up, should you be doing more, should you have the discussion with the village manager, the new village manager, and the council about stipulations and things like that? That might, in the long run, save us. Again, it's really more of a how this village wants to handle those charges. So maybe that's a future conversation.
Mike, quickly, if I understand this added construction, or added value chart, you're saying that annually we realize about $250,000 in added assessed valuation?
No.
No, added revenue.
Added revenue.
Added revenue.
That's tax dollars.
Okay, so if everybody keeps building.
The first columns show the actual assessment values.
So people keep building and getting permits from the building department and approvals from the zoning and planning board, improving their homes. These are typically home improvements, I assume, because we're not putting up any new buildings.
The majority of
town. So this is just coming from home additions to roughly $250,000. It's an interesting number, and it does give us a little bit of head start on the revenue side to help where we are on the expense side. The typical increase every year far outweighs that by about, I'd say, 4 to 1, but it's going in the right direction. And the prior department, the health department, I made the observation that 2 years ago they cost us net a lot less than they're projecting this year. Now, you're the opposite. 2 years ago, the net cost to the village was $340,000, and this year you're projecting a net cost to the village of $290,000. Is that 2012 number just because of tax appeals? Why was that so much higher? What have we done to improve so much?
That was the down payment on the reassessment. That was the first year in the 5-year emergency appropriation. We had to budget it in the account. So if you go back again, go to the prior 2 years, you'll see that it's less. So that was the down payment. The rest of the payments are being paid. Let's see if you could.
Emergency. 5-year special emergency appropriation. So in the budget, there's a payment of $48,000 per year. Until it's paid off.
So for purpose of simplicity, the assessment process costs us about $300,000 a year. But I don't see, and nothing jumps out as an expense where you might whittle that away. I wish I could find something like that, but I don't see anything.
As I said, Matt and I have both sat down and felt there was a need to, again, go back over how we do things to make sure that we're doing it in the most efficient manner. Because sometimes, you may not see it in dollars and cents, but the amount of time that you spend on something and duplication, can increase your efficiencies, therefore saving money. It may not show up in a budget sheet, but we're hoping that we can find a better way to continue to successfully, and I think we've done a very good job We have not spent a lot of money on appraisal fees. We do have one coming up now because we got somebody playing some games with us, so, we'll play the game as well, but we try to do it as best as we can.
And just one last question, for purposes of longer-range planning. I understand the reassessment reallocated the tax burden, which had become somewhat unfair in some cases and overly generous in others because of houses not all, the rising tide or falling tide in that case didn't drop the boats at the same rate. But even since that reassessment, which was 2013, right?
Correct.
Beginning of 13, the market has been pretty robust. When would you anticipate the next requirement for the next reassessment?
Well, if we go back historically, we've looked at a 7 to 8 year cycle.
7 or 8 years.
Now that the frequency or the number of years in between will be less when we're in a downturn market because there is a negative in not redoing it. So when we're in a growth phase, the time is longer. So we did the 2001, we did a revaluation. So in 2008, 7 years later, we did one, and that was during the peak growth, the 2000s. And then, we got 5 years out of it, but again, it was at a point where we were almost forced to. When you're in a rising market, you get the benefit of what they refer to as the assessment corridor. There's a 15% plus or minus range off of the average. So you have that protection in there. So somebody would have to be outside of that corridor in order to prove their case. When you're over 100%, there's no corridor. Yeah. You can't exceed it. So you do have more flexibility. And you go all the way back to the 60s, and it'll work out 7 to 8 years.
7 or 8 years. And I guess the rate of tax appeals, particularly successful tax appeals, would be an indicator to us that it's time.
Actually, when we're in the rising market, you get less and less appeals because people can't prove their case.
Right.
And that's what happened back in the 2007, 2006 time period. The market was such where people couldn't prove that their assessment was out of line.
Right.
So we were dealing with maybe a dozen, 2 dozen, not the couple hundred.
Excellent.
I didn't hear you saying, you're not asking for any additional employees or part-time?
No.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks for all your time, yeah.
And the information you're seeking, I'll get back to Heather.
Thank you very much.
And try to get it to you as soon as I can.
Great, appreciate it, Mike. Thanks.
Thanks for the water.
Okay. That's all we have for tonight. Again, the next budget meeting is this Friday night, 5 o'clock, and we have some big departments that night. We have police and fire, so that should take a while. I just want to mention to you, one of the pages you got this evening was the capital budget. Please be sure each night to bring this capital budget with you, because these departments really didn't have capital requests, but others going forward will, and then we'll review their capital budget at the same time.
And is the capital budget reflected in all the upcoming departments' budget? The new sheets and stuff? Or are we going to put them together? Yeah.
Microphone.
Yes, my understanding was going to leave the capital budget sheets separate the way they are, so that after we discuss their operating budgets with the revenues like the Finance Committee recommended, they could go right into capital.
Because, one thing, I know we talked about it, and I don't know what the FAC has been thinking about this, but Bernie brought up the point before. It'd be great to have it just in one place, like even Matt's legal costs, the capital costs, what each department is costing. I think that, yeah.
And that's reflected on the summary, the first page that was handed out that includes depreciation costs for the fleet vehicles for that particular department, gasoline, and also the facility charges. It just so happens that the departments we discussed this evening were all part of Village Hall, and I really didn't have the time to break out square footage for, say, the assessor's office to come up like, say, if they had to rent an office building, an office space out. But the other departments, say for traffic and signal, the fire department, there's a line on the summary, the first page of their budgets that reflects operating costs as per the Finance Committee's recommendation.
Okay, great.
We'll list vehicles, fuel, post-retirement costs, terminal leave costs. When I'm to separate the legal fees, usually 1 month's bill is like 15 pages long per se. To spread it out to each department would take some time. To reflect tax appeals or special litigation related to personnel or whatever, There's each different case. But that's why you have 2 sheets, because the first sheet was the summary sheet based on the Finance Committee's recommendations. The second sheet is your head count that shows your people from last year to this year. And then the second sheet is the old way, just in case, which break down salary and wages for overtime purposes. So like when the police department comes in, you'll see what was budgeted this year, last year, and the actual expended for the last 4 years. So you have that information as well.
And we have the old way too, because we have to do it that way for the state budget.
For the state documents, I can
In fact, I
reflect
found
that.
it useful also to have both because I'm so
Good.
used to the old ways. So
Yeah.
That's good.
Lean us off it a
That's why
little
we
bit.
have the best of both worlds, right?
I think besides for our planning, I think it's pretty good for taxpayers to have a sense of, what the services that we want cost. We want a health department with, the animal control and all. We saw tonight that's $130,000 a year net, cost to the village. We have a tax assessor's office. We have to have one. That costs the taxpayers about $300,000 a year. And I think those orders of magnitude are helpful, for people to know. I mean, obviously, these are not the heavy cost items. I think everybody knows that, but it is useful to see, at least to me, and I suspect to a lot of people paying taxes, to see what these services cost on a net basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Motion to adjourn?
Have a second?
One second.
All in favor?
Everybody froze for a second there.
Anyone opposed? Thank you.
Great, thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, looking to see who was going to second.
Who's getting married? You're getting married here?
Yeah. On camera.